Hey everyone, welcome to Curtin Call. I'm Kevin Curtin. I'm here today at the Ridgefield Playhouse with a very special guest. This man right here is a guitarist, songwriter, producer, and engineer, and has worked alongside some of the greatest groups in music history: Buffalo Springfield, Poco, and Loggins Messina. It's truly an honor to be here with him today, so without further ado, I introduce you to the legendary Jim Messina.
Nice to meet you.
Jim, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
So, you're doing a show tonight. Really looking forward to that, and you guys sound great. What's your favorite part about playing live?
Playing live?
Yeah. Playing live. Yeah.
Now, I think that my favorite part is I get a chance to work with the people that that my music is the most intimate with. We've all worked together for many, many years. Some of us even back in the 70s. Craig Thomas has been with me since 1979 and before when we were jamming, but he was with me on the Oasis album. Gary Olear has been with me since, like 1992, the violinist, guitarist. And Mike Brady goes back actually into the 80s. He worked with me on the Messina album. And Dave Beyer, who I met in 2004 doing a benefit for the La Conchita mudslide victims, which is really only down the road from where I used to live in Montecito, that just happened. So we've all known each other, and these guys are exceptional when it comes to reinterpreting, or interpreting, I should say, the genre, the different music from Springfield, Poco, Loggins Messina. They do a great job.
Sure.
So that's nice because I can bring my history with me as far as music, but I bring the arrangements and people who can play it.
Sure. So, your music has been the soundtrack to many of our lives all over the world. What are some bands that shaped your life growing up, and maybe up to now?
Well, it's hard after I became, a professional because one focuses on their own stuff. But growing up, I was listening to a Stevie Ray Vaughan album one time in my garage. I do carpentry work, and I was listening to his record, and all of a sudden it stopped and gave an interview. And he was saying, he says, I started out, he says, I used to play, just to listen to like Dick Dale, and he goes, and I go, wow, I used to do that too. And he says, and I really kind of like Freddie King, and I'm like, God, I listen to that too, And I started realizing that many of these early guitarists, the Freddie Kings, the B.B. Kings for some people, the Ventures for me, the Torquays, these were all very influential sounding records that brought me to wanting to try to create that sound and have that guitar. And of course, I was very poor. I could never afford a Stratocaster when I was in high school, but I finally got one. I finally got one at a pawn shop. And so I think those early days really gave me the inspiration to want to do what I wanted to do. Once I got to Hollywood as a producer, I was hired out of high school to work for Ibis Records and to produce for them for a year. But once I got down there and I saw how great all the musicians were, I mean, goodness, there was Larry Knechtel, Joe Osborne, James Burton, Keith Allison. They were so good.
Some of the best.
Some of the best. And I thought,
time,
I'm never gonna be able to be that good. So I decided to apprentice and work as a recording engineer.
Yeah.
And Mike Dureau, who got me my start in that, he was the engineer when I was producing at Ibis. He gave me an apprenticeship, and together he taught me how to wire and to build studios, and that's how I fed myself growing, through that time. But it wasn't really until we finished that one studio that we built, where Roger Miller came in, and Dorsey Burnett came in, and Joe Osborne, James Burton, and all these great rockabilly players that I went, oh my God, this is so cool, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to say what does it, but at some point in time it clicks in and you start creating your own voice, as I did on my instrument. It was a combination of hearing all of these people and what they did to inspire me to come up with my own tones and my own sounds. But it's hard as I go along, because I just get so focused on my own stuff pretty selfishly. It's hard to, I love the Crusaders, the Jazz Crusaders were really kind of fun to listen to. I love flamenco music, flamenco guitarists. I'm in awe of how wonderful they play. But I don't have anybody I really listen to anymore.
Yeah. So, I want to talk a little bit about Buffalo Springfield. One of my favorites, which you worked on, was Kind Woman, and you play it live from time to time. What was your initial feeling after hearing that song, and what was it like being in the studio at that time, producing those guys?
Well, I was very young. I think just 18 or 19 maybe. And in 67, I graduated in high school in 65, so I was 17, 18. I was 19. I really didn't know the Buffaloes, who they were. I was an engineer, and I'd work from 8, 9 o'clock in the morning until 2 or 3 at night and drive home, get up and start the whole process. And the only music I was, got a chance to really hear was on the radio, on the drive-ins and the drive-outs, and then, of course, what was happening in the studio. When I first started working with the Springfield, I realized when Neil came into the studio the first time, he had a whole bunch of tapes, and he had to sort these tapes out. Some were going to become the new album at that point, which would have been Buffalo Springfield again, and some stuff that had, been cut but not mixed and set. And so I'm listening to the stuff that's there, and I'm going, oh, I heard this song on the radio. And it was Bluebird, right? I went,
Oh, that's a classic, yeah.
I really like this song,
Yeah.
And then suddenly I realized, oh, this is the band that did it. And you don't often, when you're a professional engineer, you do what you're told to do, and you do the best job you can, and you're not always getting the Class A players.
Sure.
But this was different than Class A players. This was just a musical art form that was very different. Folk rock is what it was eventually labeled.
Yeah.
But getting to know them, and they were very individual. They were all very, very serious about what they were doing individually, not so much collectively when I say as Buffalo Springfield, because I kind of got there at the end when I guess some things had gone on. They were always very respectful. There was no arguments, no anything, and especially in front of me. And so I wasn't aware of any weirdness. So my experience has been very positive. Kind Woman, to answer your question, Steve Stills actually came up to me when we were starting to produce that third record. And he said, Richie wrote a song called Kind Woman that I think you really should be aware of. He says, have you heard it? And I said, no. He says, you should have him play it for you. So Stephen was the first one to turn me on to it. And then when Richie started to do it, I realized it was really one of his better songs, as Stephen had said. And and it also was a very pivotal point in especially my life and Richie's life, because it was that song that really convinced Richie and I to form what eventually became Poco. We were riding in the back seat of a car one time on the last Buffalo Springfield tour with the Beach Boys, and we weren't sure what we were going to do, and we were talking about it, and he was a little nervous about it, and I said, hey, if you want to work together, I said, why don't we do something closer to, instead of folk rock, why don't we do something with some country in it, maybe country rock, maybe that's what it might be, So I said, well, I don't know, but we'll see. So we went back, started working on the album. We'd already recorded Kind Woman in New York, and I wanted to put a steel guitar on it. I just thought it would be the best thing. And there were several players, great players in town. But Miles Thomas, who was our roadie at the time, Buffalo Springfield, suggested that he had a friend in Colorado named Rusty Young, a young guy about our age, and he said, you really ought to bring him out and try him out. I think he'd be great.
That's great.
So that was the time when I was working on putting that steel guitar on the album that it finally dawned on me and Richie that this might work. We might be able to take this guy and he and I and start a new band.
Yeah. And then became Poco, and we had Picking Up the Pieces, which is a monumental album. And really, without Poco, I don't think we would have had groups like the Eagles. And speaking of the Eagles, little band, you had Randy Meisner and Timothy B. Schmidt, who later went on to be in the Eagles. And what was your experience working with those guys, and do you hear your influence in their music?
Oh, I don't know that I hear my influence in their music. That's a question you'd have to ask them, but they were wonderful to work with. Randy was an exceptional pal. We used to have a lot of fun. I remember in the early days, we went to a party once at Van Dyke Park's house. And,
Van Dyke Park's,
yeah. Yeah, and it was in
he's
LA.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
He had a huge, huge house down there. And it was a Halloween party, and Randy and I went as the Lone Ranger and Tonto.
Oh, that's great.
That was a lot of fun.
Great.
I think we drank a little too much and got stuck in the basement and couldn't move. And there was a steel band down there, and they were playing, Caribbean music, and it was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever heard in my life. So we hung out down there together. And Timmy, he was super. I mean, he came in, from Sacramento, a young man, and had a lot of energy and was really there to work and please. And I don't think we could have gotten where we got with Poco without Timmy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I went back to playing bass for a while until we could find a bass player. And then when Tim came in with his voice, it made it possible for me now to move back over to guitar.
Right.
So both of them were exceptional players and people, and wonderful to work with.
A lot of history there, yeah. So what's your, moving to Loggins and Messina, what's your fondest memory from recording Sittin' In, the debut album?
The Sittin' In album.
Is there one special memory that sticks out?
Well, that was a lot of work. That album took a long time to get into the studio. So
Yeah.
what stuck out was that we actually got through the whole thing.
Right.
But I think one of the nice things about that album, as I recall to answer your question, we cut that live, and Kenny's original vocal that we did on that song we kept, and it is part of the history of that whole session. Vahivala, I had a friend named Tommy Reynolds, who, because I'd become inspired by the Jamaican music.
Sure.
He was also a lead pan player out of Jamaica, and because of my relationship with him, working with Jerry Riopel on some music, I asked him if he would make some drums for us. So Michael Amardian at the time was in the band, and Michael's a phenomenal keyboard player, and his musical sense is just genius. So he gave him a pan with all these hammers on it and had written C sharp, C, D, D sharp, E, F, and Michael just, okay.
He banged it
and
out.
he learned how to play the lead solos on that, and so that was all recorded live.
Unbelievable.
I should say we recorded the track and then we added that stuff as a section live, overdub section.
Yeah.
So just the great tones and the great colors. That album for me, I wanted it to be for Kenny. I'd gotten caught, with folk rock music and acid rock, and that was scary. So when we did country rock, we thought, well, this is going to be a new thing and people don't embrace it. But they did as an audience, but as radio stations, we'd go to a country station, they'd say, oh, we can't play it, it's too rock. Or we'd go to a rock station and they'd say, we can't play it, it's too country. It's like we had some music that just couldn't be played, and yet everybody loved it. We sold all our shows out but couldn't get any airplay.
Yeah.
So when I went on to Kenny, I just said, you know what, I'm not going to get caught in this trap again. And he had the talent, he had the ability to shape his voice in different ways in which he liked, and he loved, blue-eyed soul, and he loved folk, and he loved country. So I pulled together the songs that I think that would give him the greatest diversification coming out as an artist, and thank God it worked.
Yeah, job well done. One of my favorites to this day. Moving on to the second album, two of my favorites from the second album are Thinking of You, which you wrote, and Angry As, which you co-wrote with Kenny. What was the story behind those two songs? Because they're both, some of the best songs of all time.
Thinking of You, is that the song you said?
Yes.
I don't know, I just
popped up one day?
It was just a girl that I saw one time, and she wouldn't have anything to do with me, and I started writing the song, and then finally later I told her it was about her, and then I kind of ran away, and that was it. But Angry Eyes actually was a song that I had started already, and I used part of what was in that particular
Great riff, yeah.
is in a movie called Evil Roy Slade, and it's a comedy. It's very similar to a Mel Brooks movie before Mel Brooks was making. I can't remember the comedian, but his name was John. God, I can't remember his name. But Evil Roy Slade. See if you can find it. Mickey Rooney was in it.
Mickey Rooney, okay.
He played Stubby Index Finger. He was owned a teletype company or telegraph company, and he wore his finger out on this. Crazy stuff. But I used that theme when the bad guys were coming in. And I always loved those few notes. And then
Oh, I love it.
I,
It's
I
great.
I started working with Angry Ice, and I brought Kenny on to see if we can finish up some of the lyric on it, because I thought it would really work. And
And thank God it did. Moving on, Full Sail, one of my favorites as well. How did you get the concept for the album, and can you tell us a little bit about the story behind Watching the River Run, which is one of my favorites?
well, Watching the River Run is a song that actually Kenny had started and brought to me.
Okay.
And it's an interesting thing because he says, if you ever play that game where you write something down and then you fold it over and then
Sure.
you write something on it and then you fold that down? And I said, well, no. But he says, well, how about I give you a line and then you give me a line? So he said, if you've been thinking you're all that you've got. And I said, well, don't feel alone anymore. And in essence, he wrote, so when we're together, we got a lot. And I said, that's because I'm the river and you are the shore.
Unbelievable.
And that's how it started.
Yeah.
So that's the way that happened. Full Sail, kind of, for me, and the construct that I threw out for Kenny was, I'd been represented by an attorney who represented Island Records, Chris Black, I think his name, and he had the Wailers. And I got a chance to hear some of that first reggae music when it came
Sure.
over before it was released, and I really liked it. It really had an island feel.
I love that. I love
And
that feeling, yeah.
the original stuff was super and simple and honest. And so I just wanted to try to find something that we could create in our own genre of island music. And I was very attached to Hawaii. So we went over to Hawaii. We did a photo session, which came out really good. And then I started pulling songs together that I thought would work. And
Yeah.
one of his was Sail in the Wind, which was really not about sailing. It was about kite flying. But kind of twisted it to work. Like I had an old Telecaster. My old Telecaster had a guitar strap that Richie Fiore made for me. And my pickup was microphonic. And I was sitting there in the session as it's starting off, and I'd move it and go, and they'd say, stop. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but it's my strap, I can't keep it. So did it again, and it happened again. And I this time just let it happen. So they did it, and I just made it sound like ropes on a ship.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
So I created this great
really
sound
cool.
effect, which we then left in
Yeah.
and played. And then Lahaina again to
Great song.
make that theme work. I came up with that for
I just love how that song opens up, you
Yeah.
know, just right away. Grabs you in, yeah.
and then Coming to You was part of You Need a Man, which also had that island beat to
Yeah.
it.
Another classic, yeah.
But I don't remember what else was on the album. But
Yeah. Love Song?
yes, that was
Another great song, yeah.
that was one of Kenny's. Yeah.
Yeah, great tune. So your 2005 Loggins Messina reunion show, one of the best live shows I've ever seen, and one of the best mixed live audio CDs that I've ever heard. You have an upcoming benefit show with Kenny coming up. What song do you look forward to playing most when you're on stage with Kenny?
I don't really look forward to playing
Yeah,
anything.
there's not one song, yeah.
No, it's just
being
it's
there, yeah.
being together and playing our music and having the folks listen to it. You know, I've pulled together some songs that we did with Kenny on his PBS special because we have literally no time to rehearse. We have one day and that's it.
Wow.
So I pulled as many people together that have worked with he and I that know the material. In fact, everybody here is going to be on that.
Oh, good.
Plus, I'm bringing in Stevie Nieves, who played on that album you're talking about.
Yep.
And actually, because it's a benefit, everyone's donating their time and not getting paid for it. But
It's a great cause, by the way.
a friend of George Hawkins, actually, Dane Brandt, is Olivia Newton-John's music director. He has volunteered to play keyboard. So
Great.
he'll join us on that as well.
Great. So you actually, speaking of albums, you have a new album out called In the Groove, and I'm just curious, what do you look forward to most when creating a new album?
Well, it changes over the years depending on the demand. You know,
Right.
there was a time when they were actually paying me to get in there and make records.
Right.
Now I have to pay myself to make
Right,
records.
right.
At this point in my career, because I really I see that everything that I have done to this date has led me up to really being a performing artist. And that's where I'm not subjected to a record label, or I'm not subjected to.
You could do it on your own merit.
I can do it on my own time and on own merit, and design what I want, because it's these people who come to see me who are really paying my way to do that.
Yeah, which is a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I consider it a blessing. And so In the Groove is an album that I created specifically to cut live.
Right.
And it's Rusty was kind enough to join me. I asked him if he'd be my guest artist on it.
Yeah.
And he was kind enough to join me and actually sit in on the Poco and Buffalo Springfield stuff. And then he also sat in with me on a couple of songs on Listen to a Country Song and Holiday Hotel, which would have what Poco would have sounded like if we'd have continued.
Right.
So it's a combination, a historical walk down memory lane, acoustically in the beginning, to country, to rock and Latin jazz. So the whole, it covers my whole spectrum of music.
That's great.
And it will be a template for the next record I do, because I'll start bringing in some of my, probably drop the Buffalo Springfield and Poco stuff, because it's in the beginning, and start adding some of my Oasis stuff.
Nice, nice. And just looking back on all you've done, what are you most proud of professionally when you look back?
I'm really proud of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I do an album, I put the same amount of effort and energy into it.
Yeah.
And I try not to release things that I'm not happy with.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of it all.
Sure. And just curious, best piece of advice you've ever received? Maybe professionally, or maybe when you were younger?
Best piece of advice I've ever...
That maybe stuck with you, and to this day you still remember?
Boy, that's a good question. There's been a lot of things that that I've been told. Some of it worked and some of it didn't.
Yeah.
I still think that at this point in my life, the best advice I have taken was to stay away from drugs in my life.
I like that.
You know, I tried a couple things here and there, and it never worked for me.
Yeah.
You know, and the people who stayed with it got very sick and ill.
Or not around.
Lost fortunes, died. Yeah. And I've been able to maintain my health, which I think is the most important thing.
It is, yeah.
And of course, I think the best advice I've ever been told was, you know, stay real in what you do. You know,
I like that.
Make your music for you and the people that you want to play for, not for the record companies, or not to be a follower. You know, in order to be a leader, you can't be a follower. You have to take risks, and sometimes they just don't work. But at least
you're sticking to your guns.
You stick to your guns, and you try and do something that's unique for everybody's sake.
That's great advice. All right, so we'll end the show with how we usually do, with just social media. Where can people find you online? And
well, the best place to find me online would be to go to my Facebook page, which we have, you know, interactions going with a lot of people. And from there, you can find that, you know, my webpage, which is, you know, jimmessina.com, or my Bandcamp page, which is where we have merchandise and stuff. We have a lot of stuff, but most of the things that are there are what we, you know, sell or have available for the music that I'm currently doing. There's some older stuff on there that I own that you can pick up. The newest thing is I have this flash card. I didn't release a CD this time because
I saw this. With the new album.
There's just no more computers with CDs, and
sure.
But this new card I've come out with is an 8 gig hard drive. Basically, it's the size of a American Express card, thumb drive. You just plug it right into your car and it'll play music just like a CD.
Great. That's great.
And then I also put audio file on it that has 2448 sampling rate, so you can burn your own CD at home on your own system that you can then play anywhere you want. That's going to be a great sound. And there's a 27-minute video of our encore. I've got all the song lyrics for the songs on there. I've got lots of photographs of the band and artwork. So it's a great interim between now and when they finally come up with something that people can use. They have the computers to do it. And when you're done with it, erase it and stick it in your wallet next to your credit cards, and you got a hard drive with you all the time in case you need one.
So real quick on our end, we're on Facebook, Curtin Call, Twitter and Instagram, Curtin Call 87. I want to thank Jim for sitting in with me today. I
bet.
really appreciate it. It was an honor, and yeah, we look forward to future dates, and you know, we'll see you around soon, hopefully.
You bet.
Very good. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jim.
guys. Thank you.